Hey, welcome back to CrossTalk, the cross-table discussion about cross-type topics. I am Sam O'Banion. This is Nick Fanone. I almost got there without stuttering, but it happened all the same.
So good.
We've been going through Ephesians, and we are trudging to the end.
We are.
We're near.
We are. Incredibly practical now.
Yes.
Incredibly practical. So probably going to tackle this a little bit differently than what we have in the past. But I think I think there's important stuff that we got to learn from here.
Agreed.
So, yeah. Yep. And just remember that the practicality of all of this, the exhortation of all this, cannot be read without the context of all the stuff that we talked about before.
Yeah.
It makes no sense, and it's actually pretty dangerous.
You can really nitpick some bad things out of this.
Yes.
And
it has.
It has a lot.
Historically, we've not done well with this section of Scripture.
Correct.
Yeah. Shall we?
Cool. Yeah. I will allow you to read this week.
So we're going to start in chapter 5, verse 21. I know we ended with verse 21 last week, and it fits with the stuff in the first half of chapter 5, but it's the transition of all transitions here.
Yeah, this is the most seamless transition of Ephesians. I feel like.
Is.
It just
So big challenge to everybody. If you really want to understand or see this in a new light, go and copy and paste this text and then go and delete all subheadings and all verse and chapter numbers.
It's really easy to do on BibleReference.com.
It is very easy to do. And so just listen to how this reads differently when you're not seeing all the separation here. So, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. The mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Bondservants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ, not by the way of eye service as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether he is a bondservant or is free. Masters, do the same to them, and stop your threatening, knowing that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and that there is no partiality with them. Incredibly practical. Yeah. So lots of fun stuff for us to really mess up, and we're going to do our best to sort this out. Also, we could really get lost in the woods with this if we're not careful, and so I think you and I have been in agreement with kind of how to move through this. Let's not get so tangled up in certain things, but let those things help us guide through like a path in the woods.
Yes,
How about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, shall we?
Yeah. Start off. There's no therefore.
Yeah.
That would have been a classic Ephesians transition. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Therefore, wives, submit to your own husbands.
No.
Seamless.
Absolutely seamless. This is where our divisions, our subheadings in chapter numbers and verse numbers can really get in our way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this idea of submission, we hinted on this last time. You can go back to last week's crosstalk and hear some of this stuff, but we need to readdress this.
Yep.
Okay. Really important point of clarity here. Okay. Some of our translations are flat out wrong in how they translate this word. There are some translations that translate this as obey. That's not the word that's being used.
No.
Okay, I wrote this out for us. Hopefully you could see this on here. If not, pause it,
You should be
squint, do what you can. Hupotasso, that's our word for submit. Okay, hupotasso is our word for submit. Hupakuo is our word for obey. That shows up in 6:1. Okay, this is the instruction given to kids in relation to their parents.
Yeah.
Not the instruction given to wives in relation to their husbands. Okay? I suspect we've got a few things to talk about when it comes to marriage, man-wife, in the first century Greco-Roman world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I didn't really, I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't even think about Greco-Roman. I thought of Jewish, which is
Sure.
kind of silly.
It's not. It's really not, though.
Yeah, but it was, I always say this whenever I teach a class, I go, sorry ladies, but you were less person, more property. Something like oftentimes. Oftentimes, but that's, again, I'm going to get on a soapbox of something else, but I think the Bible is one of the most progressive books of religion ever, especially of the time.
And culture.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, women could own property in the Old Testament, which was shocking.
Very shocking. They could own property in the New Testament. Specifically, when you get to the first century where Paul is writing, and this is so terrible what we've done with this passage, because it's become this like ultra conservative beatdown,
Yeah.
and it's become this old way of thinking. It's not old at all. In the era in which Paul wrote these instructions, was actually a very big renaissance of feminism, and I'm not talking about a healthy kind of feminism. Okay, I'm talking about a very dangerous kind. So every letter that he writes in this section is subversive to the culture, and I the number of times I wrote the word subverse or subversive is just incredible as we do this. So you go back to 5:1, submit to one another. My note, subversion of the normal term. This isn't, when someone would use this term, hupotasso, they would never use it in terms of we submit to one another. It's always used in terms of a hierarchy. And Paul changes the game. The first guy to do this changes the game. All of a sudden, we're dealing with a totally different spectrum here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we now submit to one another. We've equaled the playing field in the presence of God, specifically corporately when we're gathered. We've equaled the playing field. You have presence there. She has presence there. I have presence there. There's no, God doesn't like give us stars or stripes or anything like that to rank our order here. Quite often, that word for submit really has to do with some kind of authoritarian type of thing, which Paul changes for us. And he says, submit to one another, not because I like you or because I'm laying myself down for you or because you're more important or because I'm more important. It's out of reverence for Christ. And the word reverence is fear.
Yeah.
But that's going to be really, really important when we get down to the nitty-gritty of some of this stuff, especially when we get down to verse 33 in chapter 5. But out of fear of Christ, out of fear for Christ, in other words, out of recognition of His authority to us. So by me submitting to you, you submitting to me, I'm in submission to Christ.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that play out in all of our relationships? Here we go. Wives, submit to your husbands. I've got some notes. I'm just going to read these notes. You do.
Yeah.
You interrupt me anywhere with this. Just some things to point out. So wives and husbands in the Roman, Greco-Roman era, especially in Western Asia or where Ephesus is. Okay. First of all, got to address the Roman man. There was I guess it was law. We mentioned this way back in the introduction of this, talking about adoption and adoption rules and how families work together.
Yeah.
So the patria potestas, in other words, the Roman man was considered the owner of the oikos. Okay, so the oikos being the family unit, the household,
Yeah.
however that is. So that's wives, children, slaves, concubines still. Business, anybody that just the oikos that's going on, the place of influence, considered an owner, right? Legally, there's ownership there. Then we have to deal with the new Roman woman, okay? And there's a guy named Bruce Winter who writes at great length about this. So if anyone wants to go check it out, Google Bruce Winter, and you'll find some stuff there. He wrote about how they were beginning to experience greater freedom than they ever had, greater independence than they ever had, and experiencing a higher place in society than they had ever had. And oftentimes what comes with greater freedom is irresponsible behavior with that. Like if you're not trained in freedom, you get yourself in trouble. And I'm not picking on gals, but this is what's going on specifically when he's writing this.
Yeah.
All right. So the argument, I got to be very clear here, is not take away freedom. That's dumb.
Yeah.
The argument is let's train ourselves in the freedom that we have.
And that will come up later in a big way.
Correct. We have all kinds of evidence of women being wealthy. We have all kinds of evidence of those wealthy women having a very large impact and influence in public life. They would have jobs in the marketplace, and they had jobs in the city government. Okay? Here in a little bit, I'll read some of those things, but it was such an impact on the culture that Caesar Augustus himself wrote or heralded a couple of different laws, all right? And see if I can say this right. Lex Julia de Moritandis Ordinibus and Lex Julia de Adulterius Coercendis.
We didn't learn Latin.
We
Let's
didn't
just
learn
throw
Latin
that out
at
there.
all, okay?
That's Latin and that's hard.
These laws were put into place by Caesar Augustus because he was seeing the individuality of every gender, right? The wife, the children, the teenager, the husband, everything like this, and it was degrading the family. It was absolutely crushing the family, and the family was the primary source, the oikos, the primary source of good business and civil society, all right? So these laws existed specifically to curb promiscuity, existed specifically to curb and strengthen the traditional family unit, okay? And it incentivized married women to have children. In other words, if you're in a marriage, don't go outside your marriage and try to start other oikoi, right?
Oikoi.
Yeah. Because that's what was going on.
Yeah.
So it was like the 1960s, honestly, the way that you read this.
There's nothing new under the sun.
There's absolutely nothing new under the sun. And by the way, I will say that happens when large parts of society press down on groups of people. Okay? You have the rebellion with this, and out of rebellion, nothing good ever happens. It really, or results, I should say. Nothing good really results from that. It's
Culturally?
well, you end up.
Sorry.
It's the act of the acts of rebellion right there. So, for instance, in this one particularly.
Okay. Never
Okay.
mind.
So I rebel against the male dominant figure, promiscuity, adultery. My family is no longer my primary concern.
My brain went straight to when I think of rebel, I think of war. Mm-hmm. And so if you're rebelling, like we're in America, like when you say nothing good comes out of rebellion, you think, well, America became America out of rebellion. You think the bad part is the war.
That's the point I'm making.
There has to be some sort of
That's my point I'm making.
friction.
That's my point I'm making. But the other point I'm making is rebellion occurs for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay. The rebellion does not occur because.
Yeah, rebellion comes out of oppression, and there will be always friction.
That's my point.
Yes.
That's my point. Okay. So there were prominent women in Asia Minor. In the 1st through 3rd centuries, we have evidence of no fewer than 28 chief officials which are basically the mayors of cities, major cities, that were women. We have no fewer than 48 who possessed, significant positions. One of them known as the gymnasiarch, which is the state official that ran the gymnasium, which was the education, exercise, and athletic center of a city or a culture. They held other official places were alongside chief officials, where they were given certain authority to not just make laws, but to enforce the laws that were handed to them, particularly by the empire. There were many other officials that presided over things like athletic games, which were a big deal, over parades, over even things that were to bring in city projects like buildings and roads and construction and plumbing even.
City manager.
City manager, but it'd be project managers
Yeah.
of those things.
Yeah.
And those were held by, we have evidence that they were held by women. Also, there was the impact of the goddess cults that were relatively new, which is precisely what we're dealing with in Ephesus.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Artemis, Isis. We have one just known as Mater Magna, or Sibylle. Kind of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So men in submission to these feminine goddesses.
Mm-hmm.
And it absolutely had an impact. And so from this, we learned that oppression was not the norm necessarily during this specific time. Oppression of women would have been seen in poor light.
Yeah.
Okay? Which is bizarre that we took a passage like this and we make it to oppress women. I don't get it.
Yeah, we went the opposite direction of
That pendulum went that's just weird.
Yeah.
That's just weird. Also, Roman cities were a socioeconomic class system, okay? I think so many times a passage like this was taught in such a way that it was a genderfied system or a racial system, and it wasn't. It was socioeconomic. But here's the biggest part about understanding the class system is that there was no middle class.
Yeah.
Like, you were either somebody or you weren't.
Mm-hmm.
There was no middle ground there. That impacted how really women were viewed,
Mm-hmm.
or wives were viewed. Some wives had to work out of necessity because they were not high class,
Mm-hmm.
right? And some became wives not out of choice. And so it was very, very interesting to think about this. There's a variety of ungodly cultural pressures that existed in the family. And so Paul's writing and speaking into this.
Yeah.
There were newfound freedom that often led to abandonment of families. So whether that is a woman stepping in, getting brave based on the acts of other women, kind of, okay, she did this, so that empowers me to do this. Or men who were going from this class into this class, see you later. Like, I'm not taking you with me.
Yeah.
There was the rise of men repudiating masculinity. In other words, it was a very big cultural push that as a man, I take on feminine qualities because they're the ones gaining influence. This feels very familiar.
Especially, that'd make sense, especially in a city like Ephesus, where the city goddess, or the city's god, is a goddess.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the main.
Absolutely. That should not be understated.
Yeah.
The demasculizing of men was a prominent feature. I actually think that in that influences all of our understanding of when Paul's writing about men and women roles and husband-wife roles, is that we need to understand masculinity and femininity, and that it's not the same thing, and that he is usually writing to say that there's a difference, and it's a created difference.
Mm-hmm.
Paul's writings are also Christological in nature, or from a Christological perspective, especially on the ideal for husband and wife. In other words, it's under the influence of Jesus.
Yeah.
Here's how Jesus relates to us. Therefore, that's our model for husband and wife. And Paul's comments are counter to every cultural pattern. It is just absolutely counter to every cultural pattern, and rooted in the creation design.
Yep.
So anyway, that's our setup for that in understanding that. I don't know if you had anything to add to that or.
I think you covered it pretty well.
Okay, so again, we had to do that with adoption to understand what's going on as we
Yeah.
understand how we belong to Jesus. So verse 22 says, wives, submit to your own husbands. It's the meaning of that word, the hypotasso, is to come up under, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to submit, if you think of like a bird and you're going to submit to the bird, you come up under the wing and you both are being led to the same destination.
Mm-hmm.
Submission, right? Same mission. I'm up under that mission.
Yeah.
That's what it's talking about. It's not a conformity necessarily to the patriarchy.
Yes, or obey even to the point of sin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially in context here. I mean, if you only took those 5 words there, submit to your own husbands, and not read anything else around that, then you'd completely miss the fact that this is about Jesus and not about the husband.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Non-believers get hung up on that and wash their hands immediately and don't fully understand the context.
Correct. The verb submit there also is in the middle voice, okay? Which is a weird thing going on in Greek verbs, but it implies that you need to step into that. So this is a choice that you do this. You and I talked a little bit ago about how this is not the imperative.
Yeah.
It's middle voice.
Yep.
Implies choice. So middle voice implies choice. There's your way you're going to remember that. So wives, while you are able to do this, out of reverence of Christ, out of fear of Christ, step into this place in your marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's understanding that context of Greek, I think, would quell so many problematic readings of this for people, especially women today, who are not believing and hear this and go, well, I'm not going to be free anymore. It's like,
Right.
no, you still have freedom, but it's just saying come to your own husband. Like,
Yeah.
be in that like cooperative with,
Choose him.
yes.
Choose him. Like, in your freedom,
Yeah.
choose him.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Why would you get married otherwise?
I don't know.
Especially if you're someone who's a Christ follower.
This is only problematic if you make it problematic. It's
Yes.
like this is basically just saying, yeah, when you get married, just be married to each other.
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely. So in verses 23 and 24, then he gives some theology on this, right? So again, a Christological perspective. Through this, husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Okay, this is not degrading here.
Yeah.
This is an appeal to creation. The biggest controversy that happens here is this over this word head. Okay, kephale. Paul loves to use this word. Scholars debate it to no end. There's so many forests have been killed to make the pages of the words that we have to put all the arguments on and things like this. Kephale can literally mean your head. We can be talking about biology and physiology here. It could mean your head. It can be a reference to authority. It can also be a reference to source. So like a spring is the head of a stream. In here, the argument could be made that the husband then is the source of the wife creatively, right? Out of Adam, God created Eve. And Christ then is the source for the church. I think there's some merit to that. I actually think that there's more authority that's exhibited in here, or maybe not authority, but order.
yeah.
And so the imperative is not on the wife to submit to the husband. The imperative is, husbands, you better lead your families. Be the head. Like when I said I do to my wife, I said I will take on that responsibility.
Yeah. I think again, she chose you, man. So it's your time to be the one that has been chosen.
Yeah,
Like, you need
be
to
blessed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. How would it work if we stepped into the church and the church said we're in submission to Christ, but Christ said, I'm just going to watch TV. Or I'm just going to abuse you.
Yeah.
That would be horrible. It would be absolutely horrible. And so I think the important question we ask through this is, what is Christ's role? What is Christ's role? He provides leadership. He provides direction. He provides provision. But on top of that, strength and help and sustenance. Sounds like a pretty good husband.
Yeah.
I mean, sounds like a pretty good husband. And he said, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and it's just something to say that, like, as wives choose the husband, so also we are to, like, we as the church and as people are to choose
Yeah.
our own heavenly husband, the bridegroom.
And serve our bride.
Yeah.
Yeah, and serve our bride. As he is the savior of the body, right? He himself saves the body. There's another way to think about that that's not as soteriological as that is. He's the stabilizer of the body.
Yeah.
Think about this, okay? Because the church has existed for a long, long time, and it is, by and large, lay people, okay? Is the most unorganized organization that has ever existed. There's zero reason why the church should still be existing except for Christ being the head.
Yeah.
The existence of the church is the testimony of the headship of Christ. That's a pretty good model, pretty good example, I think. And so here then, submission isn't a sign of weakness. Submission is a sign of great strength. I choose you.
Yeah. Out of all the other options.
Yeah, of everything.
Yeah.
I do you. I do to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then we address husbands, the rest of the chapter, right?
Yeah.
Significantly, there's more exhortation given to husbands.
Like triple the amount.
Triple the amount. Triple the amount. Some interesting things going on with this. Greater exhortation and admonition given to husbands, the andres, called the love, which is the agape type of love. That's used in verse 25. It's also, we now have imperative.
Yes. First imperative.
Yes.
Of this section.
Yeah, husbands, go love your wives.
You don't have the option. This
Yeah.
is the imperative. You need, like, go love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, right? In other words, be present. It is antithetical to the Greco-Roman man.
Yeah.
When the Greco-Roman man got married, it was not to give himself up for his wife, his family. When the Greco-Roman man got married, it was to gain.
Yeah.
It was to gain. There are no exhortations that we have anywhere written to the Greco-Roman men to love and not to be harsh with their wives, except for Paul.
Yeah.
But we're told he's misogynistic. Like, this is absolutely radical teaching.
Yeah.
It's absolutely radical teaching. Okay. We're given purpose then, after that. Okay, what's the reason? In order to, or that he might sanctify her, right? Hagiase is the word. Kind of a double meaning to this. It means to consecrate or to set apart. But it also means to purify from sin.
Yeah. To make holy.
To make holy. And it comes with this kind of connotation that by me marrying my wife, I have set her apart, but also I will set her apart. So already and not yet, which is the Bible's, especially the New Testament's favorite kind of way of phrasing those things. I have a truckload of notes here about sanctification and cleansing and just the rituals that would go on with that and how that worked. I don't get too lost in this, but there were very much ritual things that happened with this. This is why the wedding ceremony was kind of a big deal, is a big deal still.
Yeah.
But Jesus turns this from a ritual outward expression to an inward look. Tells Pharisees, you are whitewashed tombs. Outside you look clean. Inside you are impure, right? Titus, Paul writes to Titus, and he talks about the washing of rebirth, right? By water. Paul mentions that kind of a similar concept here. By the washing of water with the word. It's not a ritual cleaning that he's talking about here, but it's an inward form of cleansing that we spur one another on to holiness.
Yeah, and that part, the washing of the water with the word, was interesting because the word isn't logos, which I expected.
Yeah.
It's chremata, which is spoken word.
Spoken word, proclaimed.
Proclaimed,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Which is, again, when you think sanctify with the word, you think like read the like go to Bible study. But if it's no, you're sanctifying each other, or you're cleansing your wife with spoken word.
Yeah.
This is an important thing to.
My wife
do.
in submission to me and my self-loving and laying myself down to my wife, this brings this to a spot where when I speak to her, she ought to know the love of God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm really glad you pointed that out. I got that note right here too, the rhema, the proclamated word.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing process.
Yep.
It's not a one-time event. So this isn't really a reference to baptism. It's not that I save my wife. It's that I speak to her salvation.
Mm-hmm.
I speak to her grace. I speak to her mercy. I speak to her gospel.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. He's really repeating himself as he goes through the rest of this. So in verse 27, my note here, and this is just for me, that this is about Jesus and the church. Okay? So one of the irritating parts of being a pastor and teaching this or preaching this is inevitably I'll get someone say, this passage doesn't apply to me because I'm not married. And I'm going, you didn't read it. Every single Jesus follower has to understand the teaching of marriage. Otherwise, we don't understand Jesus and the church.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you are part of the church, you are the bride of Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, Jesus talks about being the bridegroom.
Yes.
That's significant.
Yes. Your relationship status does not get to determine which passages you listen to.
Yeah.
So this applied to me even before I was married.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to wrestle around with this. If we don't understand this passage, we really don't understand Jesus.
Yeah.
So that I'm looking at that. It's Jesus himself that presents us as the one without spot or without wrinkle or without any blemish,
Mm-hmm.
right? We can't do that for ourselves.
Yeah.
My wife doesn't get to do that for herself. I get to be the one that presents her that way. I'm as representative of her as she is of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite wordings in English. He might present the church to himself.
Yes. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He's not presenting it to anybody. We belong to him.
Yeah.
We belong to him just like my wife belongs to me. Your wife
I
belongs
know.
to
And so
you.
that idea is, if you, again, if you put that into human marriage, like you are trying to sanctify your wife so that like you can present her to yourself. Like,
Yeah.
If your wife is miserable, it's not because she's chosen misery. Like you
Why
need to
would you
sanctify.
want that?
Yeah, but it's like
Yeah.
it's because you need to sanctify her.
Yeah.
Like she's gonna be as like you're the one that's in control of this situation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If I have authority over her, I want her to want that authority.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want that to be something that is mutually beneficial.
Which is in the rest of this also.
Exactly. So, well, you get to 28, again, he's repeating this again, but he changes our word love.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so before, in 25, he says, husbands, agape love,
Yep.
right? The unconditional, self-sacrificial love.
Yes.
This word is philo, okay? And it really has more to do with social or moral indebtedness,
Mm-hmm.
okay? It's not that I just present her sanctified, but that I care about the presenting.
Yeah.
There's an act of serving in there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the way that my wife knows that I love her is through my service, through my provision, through my word, and it's a social or moral indebtedness. Like we're not hiding that. There's not a secretive dark spot for that.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is an outward expression here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going on. 29:30. reemphasizes to us that Christ is the source of the nourishment, of the cherishedness, right? That as I nourish and cherish my wife because Christ nourishes and cherishes his church.
Yeah. I love that, the nourish and cherish definition in Greek. Like, I mean, nourish really does mean what it means in Greek. The idea of like nurturing for growth, like allowing to grow. But when I think of, I don't know, I think there's, for me, two connotations of the word nourish. I think of nourishment as in food, like I'm eating, or I nourish as in I cherish. I kind of use those almost synonymously. But the idea of, no, nourish is literally to help grow, like to allow growth to happen.
And it's the antithesis of malnourished.
Yes. Yeah. And then cherish can literally mean to keep warm, which I think is...
So when you think of it that way, right, I have a certain power then that I could either lead my wife to life or I can lead her toward death.
Yeah.
And I
there's not really a middle either.
There is. There's none.
You can't just lead your wife to being.
To existence.
Yeah.
Right? I don't get to do that.
Nope.
No. But I can speak life into her or I can speak death into her. And it gains us nothing to go toward death.
Yeah.
Like that's what we're saved from. So I can speak that salvation to her. So that's 29, 30. 31, he just no transition at all. Just brings up Genesis 2:24.
Yeah.
Just boom, here you go.
Because we remember his body. Therefore.
Yeah, that husbands are going to leave mom and dad, right, so that they can be united to wife. They're the very popular leave and cleave situation right here. It's important to note, though, that leave does not mean for you forsake your parents, right? You're still obeying them. In one of the letters to Timothy, Paul talks about, hey, taking care of your parents in old age, right? And you're still in part of that. But the concept is that the spouses relinquish their primary allegiance from their parents and place it toward each other. That's significant.
Yeah.
And so I even wrote down a note here, too, that, hey, parents, you need to oblige. Like, you need to pay attention to that, too.
Cut the cord.
You really are.
Yeah.
It really is. When the father gives away his bride, really are doing that.
Yeah.
And now I say that as someone with 2 daughters, right? And I know you're surrounded by gals also.
Yep.
That at some point that's what I'm going to do, and her primary allegiance biblically needs to be with that husband, with that oikos. And also that's when I know I've done my job as a father.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so there needs to be a separation there. It's not forsaking. It's not that I've completely rendered you out of my life or I've completely separated myself from my parents without having contact or anything like that.
Yeah.
Nothing like that.
You just can't serve 2 masters.
You cannot serve 2 masters.
Cannot stand.
And also the connotation around this, the whole kind of aura around this is intimacy. Parents, get out of the way. That's just weird.
Yeah. It's never mind.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's 2 becoming 1 flesh, not you're not a part of that part.
Exactly. And there's no observation on that.
Yeah.
And so there's an intimacy that is involved with this. And think about this too, because this is about Jesus and his church more than anything. There's an intimacy with Jesus and his church. The idea that he wants these things for us is crazy cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. One of my favorite Greek words in the next verse, verse 32, the mysterion.
Yeah.
Mysterion.
The mysterion.
Yeah, we've heard it before.
Throughout.
Yes.
Here.
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times it gets used in Ephesians.
Yeah, I'm
including
trying to,
this passage.
I think the last one was
In 3:9.
Yeah, I was gonna say when he was talking about the mystery, and he goes, "Okay, this is the mystery.
Correct.
The Gentiles are a
Correct.
part of this
Absolutely.
promise now."
So, for reference, uses it in 1:9, in chapter 3, verse 3, verse 4, and verse 9. And then we'll see it again. It's in 5:32 here, and then we'll see it again in the next chapter in 6:19. All right. So, again, lots of debate on here. I don't want to get lost too far with this, but I'll just read the stuff that I worked out here and weigh in on this. So, marriage is connected to Christ and the church. Like, that's part of the mysterion here, the mystery. So to speak of Christian marriage is to speak of Christ and the church, right?
Yeah.
Then man and wife are divinely instituted, and it's an illustration of the close and intimate union between Christ and the church. That's the mystery
Yeah.
right here. That how does Christ care for the church? It's not mystery like we would read a detective novel or something like that.
Yes.
It's mysterious because it's outside of us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I got there. So that don't trip up on the word mystery. It's profound.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was to say, I think that the important part is, I mean, because he, again, immediately reveals what the mystery is.
Yes.
It's not mysterious because I'm saying that this is Christ in the church,
Yeah.
as marriage is, as man and wife, as husband and wife is, so Christ is to the church.
Yes, and he's the first one to do this again. This is worth repeating. This is absolutely subversive to the Greco-Roman culture in which those in Ephesus lived.
Yeah.
Right? We are mutually beneficial to each other in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Not, I marry you to get myself in another class. I'm not marrying you to gain certain business. I'm not marrying you to be profitable for me. And I'm not marrying you to put you in a lifetime of service.
Yeah.
It is mutual beneficiality here. Okay. 533, which kind of concludes our teaching then on husbands and wives. However, let each one of you love your wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband.
I feel like it's him going, that's not to say that's not actually, he's like, this is an analogy for Christ and the church, but you should still do this part.
A little bit. So this is one of those inclusios again, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Where take 33, if you fold it and match it up with verse 21, you run into it again.
Yeah.
Okay, so you see how it bookends. The word respect is again our word fear.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's not saying be scared of your husband. That's not what it means at all. But respect. Now, there is a fantastic study on this done by Dr. Egridge. Okay, so if you ever want to dig into this deeper, it's called Love and Respect. Okay, and the premise of this is that this was actually fairly this text that we just studied actually predicted the needs of a husband and wife. That overwhelmingly, when husbands were asked, what is it you need from your wife? Well, I want to be respected. And overwhelmingly from the wife, what do you need from your husband? I need him, or I need him to love me, right? That love is speaking into the heart of the wife, and respect is speaking into the heart of the husband. So go check that out, Dr. Egridge. Love and Respect, very, very good stuff. I don't want to do all like 12 weeks of it right here, but it's very practical and helpful, and you can see this, that husbands know their wives love them when you have that respect, and wives know that their husbands respect them when she has that love.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. Good deal. Should we carry on?
Yeah.
All right.
Let's go to kids.
Yeah, let's talk about kids and parents, specifically kids and dads.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids and dads. All right, so children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. All right, so kids, we got a roll here. Techna.
Yep.
Yeah, techna. This is interesting because this is referring to kids, to young ones still in the home.
Yeah.
So it could be someone up in their 20s, as long as you are part of that household, or the oikos, right?
Yep. I was going to say, just another imperative, obey.
It is.
It's not a choice.
So let me ask you this question, because
Okay.
I never thought about this until I read it this time.
Mm-hmm.
Who's he addressing in those first three verses?
And these first three
Yeah.
verses? Children?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's speaking to children.
Yeah.
Okay? This is kind of profound for me here.
I mean, and
It's
isn't techna usually like little children
Yeah.
too? Like it's not, like you said, it's kids that live in the home. Like
Yeah.
it's not grown kids.
Okay, so just a matter of some technicality here. This would have been sent to the church in Ephesus, which is meant to be read out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This means that kids had a place in the worship.
They didn't have a children's minister take them out.
But
back
even that, that's not even the point, right? He's not speaking to the parents, to the children through the parents, right? He's not saying, parents, go tell your kids to
your parent,
obey.
parents, your kids ought to be obeying.
Yeah, he put kiddos on the same playing field as us. There's no gate of children, right?
Yeah.
There's no, that doesn't exist. Like, this word is for you. This is your, there's something in here for you, right? You don't have to wait to a certain coming of age scenario where you get to actually have this. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's cool.
It's going to show back up here in a minute too, as we do this. So Paul addresses them directly and not through their parents. And this is where he uses our word obey, hupakuo. Yeah, hupakuo, not submit. We read about this in Deuteronomy 21:8, Deuteronomy 5:16, Exodus 20. This is not an unpopular command. We're very aware of the command. He adds in the Lord, which in the Lord shows us then that the obedience isn't necessarily connected to the parent. You obey in the Lord. Your obedience is connected to the Lord.
Yes, just like submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Yes.
This is, you're not obeying because they're your parents. You're obeying because
you belong to the Lord.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, hey, kids, your faith is not your parents' faith. Yeah, your obedience is not your parents' obedience. It is your obedience to the Lord. That He did not save you through your parents.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of cool. I never really thought of it like that until we got to break this down. So, one commentator said, because I said so is no longer good enough. Obedience is out of respect for the Lord, not dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't. I was just gonna say, you can't. Don't respect my authority. Respect the authority of Christ.
Because the authority I have is not because I'm dad. The authority I have is given to me because God gave it to me, and I'm here to manage you as part of my oikos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. 6:2 tells us this is the first command with promise, right?
Yeah. I loved this commandment, even in Exodus 20. But in Exodus 20, it says the land that the Lord will give you. To me, this just rings as like, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out. Like, honor your father, that it may go well with you, and you will live long in the land. Like, if you don't, you won't.
Exactly. And it's not so much, this can be misinterpreted very quickly. Okay? Well, my kid honored me and he didn't live long, right? First of all, I don't know what living long means. Right, it's like one of those things that I know when that's happened. Right? I don't know at what age we say, okay, we hit longevity.
Yeah.
All right, but it's we need to not over spiritualize it. How about that?
Yeah.
There is no upon the earth, like you're gonna live long upon the earth. It's you're gonna live upon the land. And in Exodus, the original thing is the promised land.
Yeah. The promise isn't, I'm honor your father and mother, and therefore you will live.
Yeah.
Like, that's not the.
No.
That's not the. If A happens, then B will happen.
Right.
It's not how that works.
No, it's a general pattern with an eternal meaning.
Yes.
Okay, so as your mom and dad are obeying the Lord, you obey them in the Lord, and you get to experience that same life that they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to experience the same connection to the Lord that they do. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, anything else about kids right there?
Nope. Let's go to
right.
fathers.
Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. This is one of my favorite verses of all the scriptures.
This is a really noted verse that I have here.
Love this verse. I think the NIV uses the word exasperate. I actually like that word better than provoke.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Don't exasperate. Provoke or exasperate. Fun word. Par or gizo. Par or gizo.
Yes.
Don't put your kids in a position to sin.
Yeah.
That's what that means.
Exactly.
Don't set them up to fail.
And I know I'm a broken record, but this is an imperative. Like, this isn't not a choice.
Absolutely imperative.
Do not put your kids in sin's way.
Yeah. Don't provoke them to rebel. Right? Know that wherever I set a boundary or I set the line for my kids, there's potential for them to rebel there. the role then for me in setting those limits, setting those boundaries, which by the way is very godly. Okay, that's an incredibly important role that you and I have as dad.
Yeah.
But that exists to discipline, not punish, right? And how often have we mixed those two things?
Yeah. When it kind of comes in later with the idea of exhortation. Like you're not punishing, you're trying to instruct. Like
Yes.
understand. I heard a preacher at CIY as a leader who said talking like his daughter wanted to grab the knives out of the dishwasher and he had to repeatedly tell her no and sit her down and she just cried and cried and cried because she was a toddler. And it was
Right.
no, I'm not punishing you. You're not being punished and being set aside from this. You're being exhorted to not hurt yourself.
Right.
This is what this is.
Well, and the instruct there is the Greek word paideia,
Yeah.
right? And it comes from the word child, okay? Or from the word children, pais.
Yeah.
Okay, and it really has to do with a formal type of instruction.
The definition I found I liked, it said the whole training and education of a child, mind, morals, and body.
Yeah.
That's, as a dad, that immediately made me go, oh boy, oh no.
I know, but when you think through that in its entirety, though, I think that ought to. Okay, this is kind of cool. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm the only one that gets to do that. I'm the only one that possesses that. And I just wrote down, Dad, interact with your kid in a positive way.
Yeah.
And the positive way isn't just. It's not just to blow smoke at them. The positive way is push them toward the Lord.
Yes.
Like, we should not demonstrate to them that walking with the Lord is a miserable feature.
Yeah, you don't. This is a no fun zone.
Yeah.
No, that's not.
No,
Yeah.
there is joy in this, and let me show you. There is rightness in this, and let me show you. This is better than the alternative. I heard one preacher talk about this one time, and I kind of liked it, and I'm going to kind of mess this up. This isn't exactly what he said, but it's something like this, that my job as a father is to train my kids so that they can leave, but I want them to come back and visit.
Yeah.
What else is there? I mean, as a dad, I want my kids out of the house because that's right.
Yeah. To be able to live well out.
There should be some autonomy for them, but I want them to come back and visit me.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, discipline is paideia, or paideia. Yeah, paideia. And then instruction is, I like that. The word instruction is a compound word. It literally means to put in place the mind, or put the mind in a place.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's cool. But also bring them up is the same word for nourish. It
Yes.
is ektre fete,
Yes.
which again, nourish for growth.
Yes. Yeah.
Just
put them in a position to do that. Like, if you think of that in terms of gardening or agriculture, don't bury the seed in some dark place.
yeah.
You put it in the fertile soil, you put it in the sun, you bring the water and the food, and let it happen.
Yeah, and so it's, I mean, these first two, it's basically just like, men, be good husbands.
Yes.
Be good fathers.
Yes.
That's all these two sections are.
Because it's subversive to
Yeah.
what men and really masculinity was in the Ephesian culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We get hit one more time, all right, with these relationships. So servants are slaves and masters. Okay, we need to address this before
Yeah.
we read this. All right, slavery. It's important to note that this was part of the Roman society, deeply seated in the Roman society.
Can I stop you real
Do
quick?
it.
Slavery in every culture and time is different.
Yes.
So slavery today is different from slavery in the 1860s.
Correct.
Slavery is different in the 1860s in Belgium and America.
So-
there's going to be massive similarities, like slaves weren't exactly well treated in Roman times, just as they weren't well treated today or in the 1860s and so on and so on. But culture, time, everything changes the way slavery works.
And Paul is speaking into the culture.
Yes.
Okay, he is not saying this needs to be the culture.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, we have other passages in the New Testament where Paul's saying, if you can get your freedom, get it. The entire letter to Philemon is about, hey, your slave ran away. Give him his freedom.
Yeah.
Be nice. Be kind. Go read that. It takes you 2 seconds to read that letter. It's chill out, Philemon. Right.
Yeah.
Here it is. It really again has to do with socioeconomics. Okay. At this time, more than 1/3 of the population were slaves.
Yeah, in this historian talked about how that slaves became so commonplace that the Senate considered making them wear different clothes so they could be
Yes.
identified.
Yeah.
But they were afraid that the slaves would see the amount of slaves around them and rebel. They're
Absolutely.
Like, there's two. If we made them do that, they would realize they could make their own little city and crush us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let me speak to some of the differences real quick, because this is not like the New World slavery.
Yes.
All right. Okay. So the biggest factor in this is slavery in the first century Greco-Roman culture. Racial factors did not play a role.
None.
This was not based on race at all. It was based on prisoners of war.
Yeah.
But other times it's based on debt and indebtedness.
Yes.
And it had to do with your socioeconomic status, right? So you had the haves and the have-nots, and the have-nots worked for the haves. That's how slavery worked. That was the economic of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, so two, it was reasonable for a slave to expect emancipation
Yeah.
at some point in their lives. Quite often it was done by 30 years old, by the time you were 30 years old. So much so that Caesar had contemplated putting in a law saying you cannot have your freedom until you're 30, because they were being inundated by these young freed people and they didn't know what to do. And so it was just creating just a black eye on civilization.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They were paid what's called a peculum, which is it wasn't that they were enslaved because they were beat into obedience. They were paid a peculum, and oftentimes that peculum was saved up over an amount of time so that they could purchase their freedom. Or someone else would purchase their freedom for them. That's called redemption.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's called redemption.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, they were redeemed, purchased out of the work that they owed. So like you and I would work for a paycheck now, they would have already been paid for something or given something, and they would work to pay it off. All right.
I was going to say, you might have this coming up, but I like that it said it was not uncommon for desperate Roman citizens to raise money by selling their children into slavery.
Correct.
So I'm sure you were going to get there.
Correct.
But I just wanted to say, because that's so important for the whole idea
For
of
understanding.
adoption.
Yes.
And like imagine being sold into slavery as 6, 7, 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Knowing that life, and then all of a sudden you're free, and it's like all you know is what you've worked for.
Correct.
So where are you going to go?
Correct.
What are you going to do?
And as time kind of went on, they created programs for that very thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so they were also slaves were also had various specialized and responsible roles. Okay, listen to who was considered slaves. All right, this is fascinating to me. These are roles of slaves in the first century Roman Greco-Roman world. Doctors, teachers, writers, accountants, agents, bailiffs, overseers, secretaries, sea captains. Now, you also had your manual laborers, right? Bunch of agriculture, and so a lot of slaves, they would have to work hard hours doing that. But all of those other jobs that I mentioned here are actually things that we go to college for now.
Yeah.
Those are things we aspire to be, and that was a role of slave. Pretty interesting. They were often educated, and by educated that means they were taught to read, and they were often skilled. Sometimes that was part of the peculum.
Yeah.
You come work for me, I will teach you to read, or I will teach you
Like
a
an
specific skill.
apprenticeship.
Yes.
A forced apprenticeship.
A forced apprenticeship. The masters or their bosses saw this as valuable. Then freedmen, once you gain your freedom, often became citizens of Rome, and they did business with their former masters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those are differences to what slavery meant for us in the New World.
Yeah.
Okay, that said, I've got these notes right here, all right? And this in my opinion, is important for us to say this. there were still harsh environments that existed.
Yeah.
All right. They were bought and sold like animals. They were often punished. They were often violated sexually. They often labored at the master's will. They were not legally supported. They could not appeal to government. They were often victims of exploitation, and they were not legally permitted families. Right? A kind master would allow you to be with your family, but just because you had kids or had a wife, there was no legal wife, right? And you mentioned earlier, children were often sold into that.
Yeah, and there's a good section of what this person wrote that even when you became free in a society that's based on honor and shame, you're still kind of marked as, because your job as a free man would probably be your job as a slave. You just have your freedom now.
Yeah.
And so you still have that status of he was a slave.
Yes.
And so you still, he wrote, there's evidence of wealthy former slaves, but even still, they weren't allowed to serve in the government. And they were citizens, but they were still marked with this stigma of, well, he was a slave.
Right.
Like he was, because that means you were either a prisoner of war or were from a poor family that had
Correct.
to sell you in.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, it stayed with you on that. That's important to understand these quick verses right here. So 5 through 8 gives instruction to slaves. I'm going to ask this question again. Who is it that Paul's addressing?
yeah, slaves.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Slaves were there participating in worship in the same vein and aspect that the freedmen were. That, again, no hierarchy here. Slaves were active participants in worship. This is the place where we're all on the same ground. Paul addresses slaves not through their masters here.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. That is actually pretty revolutionary.
Progressive.
Incredibly radical right here. No one is writing a letter like this to a corporation, company, or market addressing the slaves.
Yeah.
Paul is. He says, slaves, bondservants, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with sincere heart, as you would Christ, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man. 6 things he tells slaves to do.
Yeah.
Okay, here's your obedience, and here's what it's linked to. 1, fear and respect. Okay. To the Lord. Sincerely, check your motivation. Obey as you would obey Christ. Obey not to be seen. Obey ultimately indenturing yourself to Christ. And obey with an attitude toward the Lord. Yeah. In Colossians, he mentions it a different way, right? Everything you say and do, word and deed, do as if it's service to the Lord.
Yeah.
So if we apply this thing to where we are now, I think we could pretty confidently say, okay, employee, employer,
Yeah.
right? At least by way of application.
This was absolutely used inappropriately in previous times.
It is not condoning slavery.
Yes.
It is speaking to our attitudes in the situations that we're in.
Yeah.
Are you in a spot that's a really rough place to work? Well, work as if you're working to the Lord. Your allegiance is to Him.
Yeah.
Okay. So work is noticed by God.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge truth. And I know we're going to move kind of quickly past that, but our work really is. What we're doing when our boss's eyes aren't on us is still being seen by God.
Yeah.
And that needs to matter. That absolutely needs to matter.
The great coach Vince Lombardi said that your character is what you do when no one's looking.
Exactly.
I think somebody else said it first, but I heard it from him.
There you go. Well, and the point is, there is one looking.
Yeah.
And that is God. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just going to throw this out there. We
Yeah.
don't need to expound on it. The 2 words for eye service and people pleaser are 2 of my favorite words in this whole section. Eye service, ophthalmodulion,
Yep.
which is literally like eye slavery.
Yep.
Which is
Yep.
fantastic. And then people pleaser, anthropareskoi, which literally is anthropos man, and then pleaser. So
Yeah.
like a pleaser of man. It's just fantastic.
Paul loves to do that.
And I'm pretty sure I saw that ophthalmodulion. This is the only place you can find it. Like Paul made this up.
Yeah, which is what he does.
So good though.
Smashes these things together.
Of all the ones, this is my favorite.
Yeah.
Eye service.
Don't just do good work when your boss is
Yeah.
looking at you. Man, have integrity in your
Yeah.
work. And by the way, I'm addressing you while you're at church. You get to be here.
Yeah.
You get to be here. I got to believe that actually slaves had to be the largest evangelical group. I have to believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of the significant cultural advantage you get there. Okay, 6:9, we end on verse 9. He addresses masters. Masters, do the same to them, and stop your threatening, knowing that he who is both their master and yours in heaven, and that there is no partiality with them. Okay, let me read these notes, and then I want to tell you what I was thinking as I read this.
Okay.
Slaves are people first, laborers second. Mm-hmm. Masters, you need to know that.
Yeah.
Both the boss and the employee are under the same Lord. Okay, those are the things that Paul says to them. Now, here's the thing. This is what I'm thinking. This is being read out loud in the presence of both the slave and the master. And the slave hears what Paul says to the master, saying, stop your empty threatening. Treat them the same way. Knowing that your master is their master.
Yeah.
You both serve and are subject to the same boss. Like every one of us has an authority somewhere. We are not the end all be all. And we will exist in eternity with each other, no matter what our socioeconomic class is in this very moment.
Yeah.
Like, if you're going to use that to determine how you're going to treat another individual, you're wrong. You are absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just wrong. He addresses the master in the presence of the slave. That's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, it's I can just see like a slave hearing like, okay, I need to respect, render service.
Yes.
Do this because I'm working first for the Lord and then for my master. And then hearing that part about the master and going, oh, wait a minute, I still got to be respectful.
Exactly.
Gosh dang it.
Exactly. Yeah, treat each other well.
Yeah.
Treat each other well.
Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
So there's our inclusio
Yeah.
on that teaching. So you fold that up and we have that mutual submission, which is, again, I cannot emphasize this enough, is exactly, the hupatasso is absolutely countercultural.
Yeah.
It is subversive to this. A master is submitting to his slave as a human being. As the slave is submitting to his master. A wife is submitting to her husband as the husband is submitting to her. A father is submitting to his son as son is submitting to it. This mutual submission to each other.
Yeah.
Basically saying, I want what's best for you. So that's
For
what
sure.
I got.
Yep, that's all I have as well. So thanks for joining us for another CrossTalk. Next week, we get into something fun. The Armor of God.
Yes.
6:10 through 6:20.
Yeah.
So, as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, let us know. I'm Samuel O. at southrockchristian.com. He's Nick P. at southrockchristian.com. And until then, we'll see you next time.
See ya.